The Symbolism of Freemasonry, by Albert G. Mackey. The Form of the Lodge. Brought to you by Masonic Audiobook Library. In the last essay, I treated of that symbolism of the Masonic system which makes the Temple of Jerusalem the archetype of a lodge, and in which, in consequence, all the symbols are referred to the connection of a speculative science with an operative art. I propose in the present to discourse of a higher and abstruser mode of symbolism, and it may be observed that, in coming to this topic, we arrive, for the first time, at that chain of resemblances which unites Freemasonry with the ancient systems of religion, and which has given rise, among Masonic writers, to the names of pure and spurious Freemasonry, the pure Freemasonry being that system of philosophical religion which, coming through the line of the patriarchs, was eventually modified by influences exerted at the building of King Solomon's temple, and the spurious being the same system as it was altered and corrupted by the polytheism of the nations of heathendom. 64. As this abstruser mode of symbolism, if less peculiar to the Masonic system, is, however, far more interesting than the one which was treated in the previous essay, because it is more philosophical, I propose to give an extended investigation of its character. And, in the first place, there is what may be called an elementary view of this abstruser symbolism, which seems almost to be a corollary from what has already been described in the preceding article. As each individual Mason has been supposed to be the symbol of a spiritual temple, a temple not made with hands, eternal in the heavens, the lodge or collected assemblage of these Masons is adopted as a symbol of the world. 65. It is in the first degree of Masonry, more particularly, that this species of symbolism is developed. In its detail, it derives the characteristics of resemblance upon which it is founded, from the form, the supports, the ornaments, and general construction and internal organization of a lodge, in all of which the symbolic reference to the world is beautifully and consistently sustained. The form of a Masonic lodge is said to be a parallelogram, or oblong square, its greatest length being from east to west, its breadth from north to south. A square, a circle, a triangle, or any other form but that of an oblong square would be eminently incorrect and un-Masonic, because such a figure would not be an expression of the symbolic idea which is intended to be conveyed. Now, as the world is a globe, or, to speak more accurately, an oblate spheroid, the attempt to make an oblong square its symbol would seem, at first view, to present insuperable difficulties. But the system of Masonic symbolism has stood the test of too long an experience to be easily found at fault, and therefore this very symbol furnishes a striking evidence of the antiquity of the order. At the Solomonic era, the era of the building of the temple at Jerusalem, the world, it must be remembered, was supposed to have that very oblong form, 66, which has been here symbolized. If, for instance, on a map of the world we should inscribe an oblong figure whose boundary lines would circumscribe and include just that portion which was known to be inhabited in the clays of Solomon, these lines, running a short distance north and south of the Mediterranean Sea, and extending from Spain in the west to Asia Minor in the east, would form an oblong square, including the southern shore of Europe, the northern shore of Africa, and the western district of Asia, the length of the parallelogram being about 60 degrees from east to west, and its breadth being about 20 degrees from north to south. This oblong square, thus enclosing the whole of what was then supposed to be the habitable globe, 67, would precisely represent what is symbolically said to be the form of the lodge while the pillars of Hercules in the west, on each side of the Straits of Gades or Gibraltar, might appropriately be referred to the two pillars that stood at the porch of the temple. A Masonic lodge is, therefore, a symbol of the world. This symbol is sometimes, by a very usual figure of speech, extended, in its application, and the world and the universe are made synonymous, when the lodge becomes, of course, a symbol of the universe. But in this case the definition of the symbol is extended, and to the ideas of length and breadth are added those of height and depth, and the lodge is said to assume the form of a double cube. The solid contents of the earth below and the expanse of the heavens above will then give the outlines of the cube, and the whole created universe will be included within the symbolic limits of a Mason's lodge. By always remembering that the lodge is the symbol, in its form and extent, of the world, we are enabled, readily and rationally, to explain many other symbols, attached principally to the first degree, and we are enabled to collate and compare them with similar symbols of other kindred institutions of antiquity, for it should be observed that this symbolism of the world, represented by a place of initiation, widely pervaded all the ancient rites and mysteries. It will, no doubt, be interesting to extend our investigations on this subject, with a particular view to the method in which this symbolism of the world or the universe was developed, in some of its most prominent details, And for this purpose, I shall select the mystical explanation of the _officers _ of a lodge, its _ covering _ and a portion of its _ ornaments _ End of the form of the lodge. Next. The Symbolism of Freemasonry, by Albert G. Mackey. The Officers of a Lodge. Brought to you by Masonic Audiobook Library. The three principal officers of a lodge are, it is needless to say, situated in the East, the West, and the South. Now, bearing in mind that the lodge is a symbol of the world, or the universe, the reference of these three officers to the sun at its rising, its setting, and its meridian height, must at once suggest itself. This is the first development of the symbol, and a very brief inquiry will furnish ample evidence of its antiquity and its universality. In the Brahmanical initiations of Hindostan, which are among the earliest that have been transmitted to us, and may almost be considered as the cradle of all the others of subsequent ages and various countries, the ceremonies were performed in vast caverns, the remains of some of which, at Salsette, Elephanta, and a few other places, will give the spectator but a very inadequate idea of the extent and splendor of these ancient Indian lodges. More imperfect remains than these are still to be found in great numbers throughout Hindostan and Kashmir. Their form was sometimes that of a cross, emblematic of the four elements of which the earth is composed, fire, water, air, and earth, but more generally an oval, as a representation of the mundane egg, which, in the ancient systems, was a symbol of the world. The interior of the cavern of initiation was lighted by innumerable lamps, and there sat in the east, the west, and the south the principal hierophants, or explainers of the mysteries, as the representatives of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Now, Brahma was the supreme deity of the Hindus, borrowed or derived from the sun god of their Sabaean ancestors, and Vishnu and Shiva were but manifestations of his attributes. We learn from the Indian pantheon that, when the sun rises in the east, he is Brahma. When he gains his meridian in the south, he is Shiva, and when he sets in the west, he is Vishnu. Again, in the Zoroastric mysteries of Persia, the temple of initiation was circular, being made so to represent the universe, and the sun in the east, with the surrounding zodiac, formed an indispensable part of the ceremony of reception. In the Egyptian mysteries of Osiris, the same reference to the sun is contained, and Herodotus, who was himself an initiate, intimates that the ceremonies consisted in the representation of a sun god, who had been incarnate, that is, had appeared upon earth, or rose, and who was at length put to death by Typhon, the symbol of darkness, typical of the sun's setting. In the great mysteries of Eleusis, which were celebrated at Athens, we learn from Saint Chrysostom, as well as other authorities, that the temple of initiation was symbolic of the universe, and we know that one of the officers represented the sun. In the Celtic mysteries of the Druids, the temple of initiation was either oval, to represent the mundane egg, a symbol, as has already been said, of the world, or circular, because the circle was a symbol of the universe, or cruciform, in allusion to the four elements, or constituents of the universe. In the island of Lewis, in Scotland, there is one combining the cruciform and circular form. There is a circle, consisting of 12 stones, while 3 more are placed in the east, and as many in the west and south, and 38, in 2 parallel lines, in the north, forming an avenue to the circular temple. In the center of the circle is the image of the god. In the initiations into these rites, the solar deity performed an important part, and the celebrations commenced at daybreak when the sun was hailed on his appearance above the horizon as the god of victory, the king who rises in light and ascends the sky. But I need not multiply these instances of sun worship. Every country and religion of the ancient world would afford one. Sufficient has been cited to show the complete coincidence, in reference to the sun, between the symbolism of Freemasonry and that of the ancient rites and mysteries, and to suggest for them a common origin, the sun being always in the former system, from the earliest times of the primitive or patriarchal Masonry, considered simply as a manifestation of the wisdom, strength, and beauty of the divine architect, visibly represented by the position of the 3 principal officers of a lodge, while by the latter, in their degeneration from, and corruption of the true Gnostic faith, it was adopted as the special object of adoration.